So let's go on and talk a little bit more about intersecting lines and specifically parallel lines cut by a transversal. And we're going to look at this diagram here to talk about this. We have some interesting relationships between the angles when we have a parallel lines, a set of parallel lines cut by a transversal. So the first thing that I want to point out is whenever we have any two lines intersecting together, this doesn't have to be parallel lines, but it can be any two lines, we set up two pairs of angles. So in this diagram, we have angle A prime and angle C prime. Prime just means, when I'm talking about A prime, I just mean that little hash mark there at the top of the A. So A prime and C prime are what we call congruent. And I should say angle A prime and angle C prime are congruent. What does congruent mean? I'm going to write congruent here. Congruent means that they have the same measurement. So let's say we knew that angle A prime is 108 degrees. Then we know that C prime is also 108 degrees. Likewise, we have another kind of set of angles. We have B prime, angle B prime, is congruent to angle D prime. And by the way, congruent, the symbol for congruent is this little equal sign with a little wavy line, or in Spanish, we would call it like a tilde on top. So that's how we symbolize congruency. And so we would know that these two angles have the same measure. These sets of angles that are made by intersecting lines are called vertical angles. And I like to remember vertical angles, V for vertical, because we can see that they make little V's kind of with the same point in the middle, the same kind of vertex in the middle. Right? So vertical angles are always going to be congruent. It doesn't matter if you have parallel lines or not parallel lines, and they are the angles that are kind of across from each other. In your Quizlet about different terms, you should have been able to identify that also A prime and B prime, they form a linear pair, and that linear pair is also what we call supplementary. Go and review that terminology if you haven't already, and you will know that the measure of angle A prime plus the measure of angle B prime is going to equal 180 degrees. So if we know that A prime is 108 and we want to add that to B prime to be 180 degrees, we could take 180 minus 108, and we would get 72. So we know that the measure of B prime is 72 degrees. So then, because of vertical angles, we also know that the measure of angle D prime is also 72 degrees. So this is the beginning of understanding some of the relationships between angles with intersecting lines.